For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss December ANC conference and beyond. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
You are cynical about what outcomes can be expected in the December conference. Do you write off the ANC for the future?
You know, I think one must be very slow to make predictions about an organization dying. Because even though an organization is not the leader, sometimes if there is a change of leader, it can actually make a very big difference. It can, if that leader has the support of the organization, he or she can revitalize the organization and can do a lot of things that can change it and revive its fortunes. But I'm not very convinced that the ANC can survive. In fact, the ANC is in existence at the moment, but it's very weakened. It's very different. It's not the vibrant organization which excited people at one stage. So one way of interpreting the ANC today, one way of answering your question could be that the ANC is already dying. But you know, you're dying and living at the same time, so that it's also living. But in my opinion, the ANC has lost it's lost its character that drew people to it. For very many people, the ANC was like a family to them. They belonged to the ANC and the ANC belonged to them. And since 1994, the ANC has become the government that controls the state. And when that happens, it's a very different dynamic from the earlier crises that the ANC faced. Now, people are very fond of saying the ANC is always able to self-correct. It did so in 1969 at Morogoro. It did so in 1985 in Kabwe. But in both of those cases, the ANC was a liberation movement which was not yet the government of the state. And since it's become the ruling party of a state, it has the dynamics of membership. What it means to be a member means very different things from when you were leading MK, when you were doing underground work inside the country, when you were doing mass democratic activities, being shot at, arrested, and so forth. Since the ANC has become government, very many people see the organization as a way of getting rich. And what that means at different levels is quantitatively different. I mean, how much money you can earn by holding a position just as a salary is very high in some positions. I mean, I had no idea what a parastatal really was before I got involved and someone wanted to become chair of one of these parastatals. And I didn't understand that that would be what someone would want, because in the struggle we were really focused on overthrowing the regime. Also, other people join the ANC and try to get elected to positions because as a result of that, they can benefit themselves, they can have economic security at the very least, but they can also have access to powers that enable them to steer work towards other people. So it's very different, and we've had this phenomenon in other liberation movements on the continent, but one very interesting one to study is that of India. The Indian Congress was the leading force in creating independence in India under Gandhi, Nehru and others. But by about the 1960s, late 1960s and 70s, it was very corrupt, it was authoritarian, and it lost power. And it's come to power, back to power once or twice since then, but it's a very different organization from before. And I think that very many people were influenced in the trajectory of the ANC and what they wanted the ANC to be by what the Indian Congress was doing at one stage. But what may be happening is that some of the decadent features are taking shape in South Africa.
So if the ANC maybe disappears formally or in practices by becoming a quite different organizations, like you've alluded about the Indian Congress, will there not be a void, or how will it be filled?
You know, the assumption after last year's local government elections was that the opposition parties would form a coalition which would rule certain local governments, certain big metros, and through the experience gained in working together, they would sustain a coalition or an alliance of forces that would be able to force the ANC below 50% in 2019, and where they would unite in governing South Africa. Now, until in the first few months it seemed that this was going to work quite well, but in recent times conflict has broken out between the partners or the participating parties in this coalition. In Nelson Mandela Bay particularly, you've seen this situation with the dismissal or the vote of no confidence in the Deputy Mayor Bobani from the UDM, and conflicts spreading to a national level. Now this Nelson Mandela Bay thing is having ramifications going well beyond Nelson Mandela Bay. In the first place, in order to remove Bobani, the DA-led coalition did not appear to have a majority. They had 60 and they needed 61, and they actually counted people who were walking out of the chamber who were boycotting. They counted those as the extra one, which is irregular and may well be set aside in a court case that Bobani is bringing. Also, some of the claims against Bobani, they may or may not be valid, but they have not been put in the public domain. And even in the answering papers of the DA against the Bobani and the UDM has brought this court action, they haven't really disclosed sufficient clarity. If he was found through a PricewaterhouseCoopers report to have been corrupt, why don't they make this public? And it appears that the UDM, Holomisa wrote a letter yesterday to Maimani, and he said to him that he managed to force them to show the report to the UDM, and the report is a provisional report and no conclusions have been drawn. So that allegation is actually not a proven allegation. It may well be that the allegations will be shown to be valid, but thus far they have not done it. And you can't expect the UDM as a partner to be happy with that sort of treatment. Also, with regard to this question of voting, they say Bobani was, and the other UDM person was always voting against the coalition. But what Holomisa says yesterday in this letter to Maimani, which I've seen, and you see where Makinana has it on her Twitter page, and she says, she has got this letter where he says, the coalition agreement says that if there's disagreement against parties, you should hold back some motion so that you can sort it out between yourselves. And the DA didn't do that. And this relates to a broader pattern, which is a barrier to sustaining coalition government. The DA doesn't seem to know how to consult. It tends to ram things through. Now, people can say this is Trollope's personality, things like that. But in Parliament last week, they brought this motion of no confidence. I mean, not no confidence, for dissolution of Parliament. They didn't consult with anyone else. James Self, I think it was, said, we don't have an obligation to consult with everyone else. We're only in coalition in local government. Now, that to me is politically really short-sighted. If you want to build an alliance, because the DA will never get 50% in 2019, I'm prepared to buy you a farm in the middle of Johannesburg Central Business District if they get over 50%. It's absolutely impossible. Now, if that is the case, they need these others, and they need to nurture those relationships, and they're behaving in a way that is arrogant. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's easy to deal. Bobani doesn't seem to be easy. Holomisa may not be easy, I don't know, but EFF definitely are not easy, and it may not be easy to deal with them, but they have worked together, and instead of provoking problems as they are doing by not consulting what's his name, Trollope, not showing them his state of the metro thing and saying they mix up who's the dog and who's the tail, that sort of talk is unconducive to cooperative governance, and I think they're blowing their chances unless they've got 2 years. It's not a long time.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Prima Media's Polity about December ANC conference and beyond.